Have you ever really thought about what a speech therapist actually does? I mean, it's so much more than just fixing lisps or stutters. It is this incredibly deep, strategic process for helping someone become a better communicator. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain and look inside their playbook.
All right, let's dive in. The playbook we are cracking open today comes from the book Language Disorders from Infancy Through Adolescence. We are laser focusing on Chapter 3, Principles of Intervention. This chapter, you guys, lays out the entire blueprint that clinicians use to teach something as basic, as fundamental as language.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about the big picture goals, like what are we even trying to do here? Then we'll get into the rule book they have to follow. After that, how they pick their targets, the actual tactics they use on the ground, and finally, and this is huge, how they prove that any of it actually worked. Let's do it. Okay, so first things first. Before a single therapy session starts, before a single word is taught, the clinician has to make a huge decision. What is the fundamental purpose of this therapy? What's the master plan? And it turns out there are really three main ways you can go.
The first two are kind of like a classic head-to-head matchup. On one side, you've got remediation. This is what most of us think therapy is, right? You directly fix the problem, you teach the skill that's broken or missing. But then on the other side, you've got compensation. And this is different. Instead of fixing the skill, you give the person a clever workaround, a tool or a strategy to just bypass the issue altogether. It's kind of like the difference between rebuilding a car's engine versus just giving the driver a new map to a totally different destination.
Now this third approach, this is where things get really interesting. It's called a systemic focus. And here, the clinician's target isn't just the person, it's their whole environment. The book gives this amazing example of a kid named Justin with cerebral palsy. He had a communication device, but his family would forget it, his classmates didn't know how to work it, so the real problem wasn't just his speech. The solution? Get the communication app on a tablet he always has and teach everyone how to use it, and boom, his whole world just opened up. Sometimes, changing the system around the person is way more powerful than trying to change the person themselves.
Okay, so you've got your main goal. Now what? Well, you need a rule book. You can't just wing it, right? And that's where evidence-based practice, or EBP, comes into play. This is the framework, the absolute foundation that guides every single decision a clinician makes.
Think of EBP as a three-legged stool. Seriously, the first leg is the hard science, all the published, peer-reviewed research out there. The second leg is the client and their family. What do they actually want? What are their values? And the third leg is the clinician's own professional experience, their gut, their expertise. If any one of those legs is missing, the whole thing falls over. You need all three for a plan that's actually going to work.
So let's talk about that science leg for a sec. You can't just hop on Google and use the first study you find. Nope. Clinicians are basically trained detectives, and this flowchart is like their magnifying glass. They go down this path of yes and no questions to figure out if a study is legit, if it's solid gold, or if it's just junk science. It's how they separate the real evidence from all the noise.
And all that detective work creates a hierarchy, a ranking system for evidence. Way up at the top, you've got level II. That's the gold standard, a meta-analysis that looks at a whole bunch of rock-solid studies. Then you work your way down, all the way to the bottom, level 5, which is just expert opinion. And as the book points out, you got to view that stuff with some serious skepticism.
So how do they actually use all this? They use something called the PICO process to ask a super clear, focused question. For a specific patient, what intervention, when you compare it to something else, will produce the desired outcome? It takes a messy, vague problem and turns it into a searchable question, which lets them find the perfect evidence they need for a specific kid, like the example they give of Brendan, a 3-year-old with autism.
Okay, we've got our goal, we've got our rule book, now it's time to get down to business. What do you actually teach? You can't teach everything at once, you can't boil the ocean, you have to pick your targets with surgical precision.
And the guiding light here is this idea called the zone of proximal development, or ZPD. The best way to think about it is like the difficulty setting on a video game. You don't want it so easy that it's totally boring, right? But you also don't want it so hard that you get frustrated and rage quit. The ZPD is that sweet spot, that just right level of challenge. The skills the person is just ready to learn, but only with a little bit of help. And this diagram just illustrates it perfectly. Clinicians are constantly trying to find this sweet spot. I mean, if you work on stuff the kid can already do, you're just wasting everyone's time. And if you try to teach something way, way out of their league, it's just going to be frustrating and demoralizing.
Hitting that zone is absolutely crucial for making therapy actually work.
All right, so we've covered the why and the what. Now we get to the main event, the how. What does a therapist actually do in the room? Well, it's not just one thing. It's a whole spectrum of different tactics they can pull from.
It's all about this continuum of naturalness. This shows the whole range of options, from stuff that looks and feels like everyday life, all the way to highly structured, drill-based exercises on the other end. And a really good clinician knows how to dance along this entire spectrum.
So over on the most natural end, the child-centered side, it really just looks like the therapist is hanging out and playing. But it's play with a secret mission. They're using these really slick techniques like self-talk, where they narrate what they're doing, or parallel talk, where they narrate what the kid is doing. The kid just thinks they're having a blast, but their brain is soaking up all this rich, targeted language. It's pretty cool.
Then, on the complete opposite end, you've got the clinician-directed approach. And yeah, this is way less natural. We're talking flashcards, direct imitation. Say this. Good. Here's a sticker. It might seem kind of rigid, but its superpower is efficiency. It lets you get a massive number of practice reps on one specific skill in a really short amount of time. Maximum reps, minimum fluff.
And this whole spectrum lines up perfectly with the two different ways our brains learn things. The natural play-based stuff, that taps into implicit learning. You know, where you just kind of soak up patterns without even realizing it, like how you learned to talk in the first place. The structured drills, that's all about explicit learning, the conscious, intentional effort to learn a rule. And the best therapy, it often blends both.
And finally, we get to the end game, the post-game analysis. There are two huge questions left. Number one, how do you make damn sure that the skills you learn in the therapy room actually get used in the real world? And number two, how do you prove, scientifically, that your therapy is what actually caused the improvement? That first question is all about generalization. And let me tell you, this is the holy grail of therapy. It's the whole point. Because if a kid can use a new word perfectly with their therapist, but can't use it with their parents or with their friends at school, then the job's not done. The ultimate goal is always for these skills to break out of the therapy room and into every part of their life.
Okay, so how do you prove it worked? Well, you use a clever little tool called a multiple baseline design. It's how clinicians get to be scientists. Basically, you track the skill you're teaching, but at the same time, you also track a different control skill that you are totally leaving alone.
In this graph right here is the smoking gun. It is the proof. Look at that top line. That's the skill they were targeting. You can see it just takes off right after the intervention starts. Now, look at the bottom line. That's the control skill they weren't teaching. It stays totally flat. This shows, clear as day, that it was the therapy that made the difference, not just time or luck or a good mood. That, my friends, is accountability.
So when you put it all together, it's just kind of mind-blowing. The playbook for helping someone with something as natural as learning to talk is this incredibly deep, scientific, and strategic thing, which really just leaves you with one final thought to chew on. If the plan to fix something as human as language is this complex, what does that tell you about the staggering, almost magical power of communication itself?